I'm Sarah Dandashy, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I'm excited to welcome my friend and fellow Skift podcaster, Sarah Dandashy, to the show. Sarah is recognized as a world-class concierge. In 2015, she was named Best Young Concierge by Le Clé d'Or, an honor that placed her among the top service professionals globally. She's worked for some of the world's most prestigious hotels, from the London in West Hollywood to the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C., and the Peninsula in Beverly Hills, giving her a front row seat to how true luxury is delivered. Today, she's a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, TV personality, and trusted voice for travelers, including as a co-host of Good Morning Hospitality and the host of the Skift Daily Briefing podcast. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
My gosh, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I was like, wow.
I mean, it always pays to have a friend as a publicist, but yours writes itself. Everything you've done is incredible.
I mean, that was very well said. I was like, wow, she makes me look real good. Thank you.
Well, this is going to be fun because we are friends. We've spent a lot of time getting to know each other thanks to the Skift universe.
Yes.
But as I was saying to you before we started recording, this is almost like, tell me the origin story. Like, give me all the background on Sarah that I've never had before. So tell me, how did you first get started in hospitality?
Yeah. So I was going to school at Georgetown University, got a fancy degree at their School of Foreign Service, a degree in culture and politics. Yes, nerd alert right over here. And I was just saying, we'll call it what it is. And I was working at a restaurant. And at the time, my cousin had just he was actually working at the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C. And he'd gone to hotel school in Lausanne and definitely had, all of that background. And he was like, well, why work at this restaurant when you can work at the Four Seasons? So I got introduced that way, totally happenstance. I was a hostess in the restaurant bar area. Meanwhile, throughout college, I ended up working at different restaurants as well as the Four Seasons. So I had bartending experience. I worked in radio, which funny how that ties into things now. And then when I ended up moving to Los Angeles, I figured, great, I'll be a cocktail server. I applied at the L'Hermitage in Beverly Hills, 5-star, 5 diamond, 21 years old, just moved to Los Angeles. And the general manager said, I think you'd make a better concierge. And I didn't know what a concierge was. Maybe not all 21-year-olds know what a concierge is. I actually knew. And I told him, I'm like, look, I just moved here. I somehow made it from my apartment to here for this job interview. I know where the grocery store is and the gas station, but I'm good with maps. I'll figure it out. And he just chuckled because he was like, yeah, you'll be fine. So that's how I became a concierge.
Wow. What do you think it was that he saw in you right away that said, you need to be working over here? Especially like you said, you had no knowledge of LA at that point.
I think he figured out, and I actually always say this to people all the time, being a good concierge is not about knowing the answers. It's about having the right attitude. I get asked all the time. I got asked today, just before we got on this call from my client, like, how many seats does this XYZ jet have? I don't know. So I did a little bit of research. And so he could tell that I basically had the attitude of being like, I don't know, but let me find out for you. And so I always say that it's all about your attitude because it's impossible. We'll never know everything. Every day there's a curveball thrown at us. And so I guess he just picked up on that. There was definitely no ego about what I didn't know. And there was this willingness to find out.
And what was that job like? Like, what was it like to be a concierge there and then your subsequent concierge positions as well?
So I always call the learning, I refer to the L'Hermitage in Beverly Hills as very much like where I just like got the lay of the land. I mean, I was very lucky that I had two really supportive concierge members. The one who was kind of like head concierge, very experienced. She was great and was just like, ask me anything you need to know. She was also highly organized. So we had a lot of tools at our fingertips. And then my other colleague, who's still a very dear friend to this day, and he wasn't, we joke that we were baby concierge together, but he had at least maybe, I don't know, 6 months or a year of experience prior to myself at another property. And so he also was like, just call me and ask me at any time if you get stumped on anything. And so they did a pretty good job as far as trying to train me as much as I could for the first 2 weeks. And then after that, it's like, look, you're going to be asked something you don't know. Just reach out to us and we'll help you. We'll also try and make sure that you've got the tools, but just know that, again, it was just going back to know that you don't have to have the answer right away, but you'll figure it out and we can help support you. So that was really great there. And then after 2 years there, I ended up not really realizing how much I was elevating the game, but it was phenomenal. I worked at the Peninsula Beverly Hills, which by far, hands down, to this day, is the best hotel in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, for sure. I don't care about the new hotels. I don't care about the other ones that have been around forever. They're lovely in different ways. But when it comes to service and those that get it on that high level, nothing beats the Peninsula Beverly Hills, in my opinion. And I don't even mean it biased. Yes, I work there, but I've also sent clients now to all of these hotels and I never get friction at the Peninsula. They just make it happen. So that was a phenomenal place to really get my grounding. And then the final hotel I worked at was the London West Hollywood. And that was great because that was more of like a step down as far as like the pressure to reach those 5-star, 5-diamond goals. It was a 4-star property. But what I loved, it was very hands off. They were very much like, we know you know what you're doing. We'll let you do your thing. And I'm so grateful for being there because it was a little bit more relaxed of an environment and we didn't necessarily have to hit those service goals. I could have more of my personality. And that's also when I started my brand, Ask a Concierge. And there's no way I would have been able to build my brand, Ask a Concierge, if I would have been at one of these other real legacy hotels where they had strict no moonlighting policies. They would have been very, very cautious about social media. Being at the London, being a boutique hotel, they had enough foresight to be like, well, the bigger that you get, the better it makes us look. Even if we're not directly affiliated, we trust you. And so because they placed that trust in me, they let me build my brand. And they never directly said where I worked because, again, I wasn't their spokesperson. I didn't want to be that. But it wasn't difficult to figure out where I worked. And so it was fine to have that loose connection and so grateful. I ended up being there for 9 years and that's where I built my brand. So huge respect for them.
Yeah. And if we go back to the Peninsula in Beverly Hills and you're saying, they really have service dialed in, what do you think makes them so successful that even after you've seen behind the scenes, where if anything, if you were going to get warts and all, it would be there, you can say, hands down, this is a place that you now send your own clients to?
There's not a lot of red tape. And so they get it that they understand the guest expectation. And the thing that's really challenging in high-end luxury hotels, and I see this at other properties, and I don't need to necessarily name names because it doesn't matter, but there are some that are very corporate. There are some that like, oh, this happens, and we can't go past this, like, they have to be there in person before we'll be able to share what room number they're going to be in. And it's like, well,
why?
Because you only have 2 of those rooms in that category. So you know which one. And they're checking in at 7 p.m. I just need to make sure that it gets to the right room and I'm having something delivered. That's it. Mm-hmm. And so where the Peninsula's like, they're far more flexible. They see the end game. They understand efficiency and they understand that, and it's not to say that they break rules because there's absolutely procedure. There has to be at that high level. But they understand where sometimes you just don't need to get caught up in the minutia and you just need to get it done. Yes. And that, again, that as a brand, as a whole, they understand it. So huge shout out to them.
This is something that has come up on this show a lot, which is when hospitality fails, is when there is a step by step, you can only do X, Y, and Z, even when the person actioning it knows it doesn't make sense. Like you just said, that's a perfect example of like, well, why can't you give me the room number if you know it's going to be that room, right? And so it's really exciting to hear you say that at the top of their game, they're giving their associates that freedom to say, you know what that guest needs. You are empowered to deliver it to them.
Totally. Exactly. It's totally, I love that you bring that up because there was this sense of empowerment and to understand that like you just have to sometimes think outside the box to just get it done, because getting it done is more important than maybe checking off the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I love how you brought that up, is that sometimes A to D is not A, B, C, D. Sometimes you got to just do A to D or A to C to D. And then you might do B after, whatever it is. So I think so long as there's that sort of like flexibility and understanding, obviously there's an element of discernment that for the staff to be able to make autonomous decisions without having to run it through everybody. But you know, it's all about efficiency, and if the guest is happy, that's what it is at the end of the day. So they don't need the red tape. They just need it done.
Speaking about another version of empowerment, it's what you talked about with the London and being empowered to be yourself, show your personality, build your brand on the side. You even just said you were there for 9 years. So it's not even like building your brand made you an immediate flight risk. If anything, I imagine the two kind of gave each other credibility. So talk about Ask a Concierge, how you built it, why you built it, what it started out as, and maybe what it's become today.
Sure. And I actually don't know if you know the story, but so full transparency, it was, well, I'll just back up a little bit more. While I was working in these hotels, I also was an actor in Los Angeles. So I was working in film and TV, I was doing sketch comedy, I was doing all of this sort of stuff. So I explain that because sometimes people look at what I do today and they're like, oh, you're comfortable on camera. And it's like, well, I also have that background. I've worked on a lot of film sets, TV sets. To just give a little bit of reference, I mentioned I also worked in radio. So when you've professionally done that, even if it is on the side, it gives you a bit of different experience. So with that being said, I started at the London and I realized I had a little bit more breathing room in my schedule. It wasn't so tight. And so I took a writing course. We were going to work on a web series. It never ended up taking off, which is totally fine. But the byproduct is we were given a homework assignment. And I also love sharing this because we as adults don't even think about homework. But even when I talk to a lot of students, I always tell them, don't roll your eyes at homework because you never know what could happen from it. I was given a homework assignment to create a vlog on what I'm an expert in. And I was like, I don't know, I like to eat healthy and work out, but I'm not a guru in that. That's not my thing. And all too often, I also like to say this, is that all too often, what we know the most or what people come to us for, we don't even see because we're so good at it. It's so close to us. It's like right under our nose. So we can't see it. So I was like, I guess I'll just talk about what to eat, see, do in LA because that's what I get asked about on a regular basis at the concierge desk. Very naive to this. And I specifically was like, okay, I'll call it Ask a Concierge. I don't want it to be Ask the Concierge because I'm not the person. I don't know everybody. I don't know everything. But Ask a Concierge, which would also be like my my chapeau, my hat to other concierge, the profession. So started doing these videos. They still exist online. You can look them up on my old YouTube page under Sarah Dandashy. I have a scarf. It's lovely, great bangs, good times. But I started them thinking, okay, it's a homework assignment. Nobody's going to want to watch this. And the whole class was like, these are great. And I remember thinking, wait, you live here. Why do you care about the top Italian restaurants or tours to take or what's a romantic place to go in LA? And they were like, well, we have friends and family that come into town. We need to know what to do. Or maybe we want to plan a date night. And that's when I had a light bulb moment that, oh, wow. The information that I know is not just relevant to travelers coming to LA. People also in LA want to know about it. So I immediately realized I had a bigger audience. And that's when I was like, okay, we really need to double down on this. and just explore. And I was doing video before anybody else was doing video. Again, I had the film and TV background. I'm like, the girl knows how to do video. Let's do that, even when everybody was just doing photos. And so ended up kind of building it from there, and it grew. And then I did a video series where I would interview other concierge and celebrities and friends that are in town. And so there's been like several steps and incarnations to it. I think a lot of people just see the end product and they don't realize, okay, this year was the year I really leveled up on posting XYZ times a week. And then this was the year I leveled up because then I started doing TV segments. So you have to understand that these are all like gradual builds to then ultimately make it the big, I don't want to call it empire that it is today. That's a little bit exaggerated, but it has, as in a big business, it has a lot of layers to it, is I think the best way to describe it today.
I'm really happy you said that too about building and people kind of looking at where you're at now and not seeing all of the work and all of the years that got you there. Yeah. When I was preparing for this, even though, like I said, we know each other, we've spent some good time together, I was looking on your website to just do my homework, make sure I'm asking like the best quality questions.
Sure.
And right away on the top of your website comes up a clip of you in a Santa outfit on Kelly Clarkson.
Kelly Clarkson, yeah.
And I don't know if you did this intentionally. You probably did because you are brilliant. But right away, even for me who knows you, I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman has been on the Kelly Clarkson show. It's such a powerful positioning moment. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about your TV appearances more too. But even just that of someone looking at that and saying, wow, look at, she's been on this show and she's done these segments and look at this incredible career. We're not seeing all of the hours and days and years and effort that you put into things that did work and didn't work and that gradually built on one another.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I've been very, I want to say like I've been very lucky to have a lot of these experiences, but that is just the icing on the cake. I mean, there's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And that's the whole thing is like people don't realize and they don't see it. And but they also say, what is it? Luck or like chance favors the prepared, you know? And so there's been a lot of preparation that's happened behind the scenes that when I've been thrown into these situations, I'm so grateful for all the years, and I mean years of experience that I have under my belt. And so, yeah, and it's been a kind of just a smart move. And just also, you know, as you build and grow, it's always challenging when you're growing as a personal brand because people get in their head and they can't maybe separate themselves from who they are. But it's when you kind of understand that, like, okay, you are the product and you take the ego out of it, you take the nervousness out of it and you're like, okay, well, how do we position this? And understanding positioning and leverage, none of it's about, it's literally, I'm like as I'm a can of Coke. I'm a can of Diet Coke. We're just trying to figure out how to like market it and like, okay, cool. You know? So, I mean, maybe like a Diet Coke, but with more hair. So that's,
or like Poppy, like the cool Diet Coke.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, again, it is sensitive and it's a lot of people sometimes have like a hard time with it, but you just have to look at it like a business and understand that that's the product. You know, same like in hotels, you know, the experience is the product and there has to be a consistency and all of that to it.
Okay, so you had this homework assignment. You create these videos. You see from your classmates right away that they're resonating. You decide, I want to do more of this. What happens next? Are you immediately like making a Google Doc or whatever there was back then and kind of
Google Docs
like creating? I mean, Google Docs feel pretty new to me. No?
I definitely had Google Docs back then. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I do remember making Google Docs for my first job. So, okay. So you're making a Google Doc of like the empire of Ask a Concierge of all the different revenue streams, or were you just like, I like these videos, I'm going to keep making these videos, and it was much more organic in the beginning of where it led?
Organic for sure. And I would definitely say I took the long way around before I even got paid, because a lot of people are like, when did you start making money? And I'm like, oh man, I was like 5 years into it. But I'm also stubborn and I want to do things the right way. Stubborn in the sense that like I want things to go the right way and I don't want to sell out. I want it to make sense. So the first real hurdle was like, great, I'm doing these videos. I didn't even advertise it to the concierge community because there were two things. I wanted to build it. And I wanted to like not necessarily have immediate competition at the beginning and have somebody say, oh, that's great, let me do it, even though It would be completely different if someone did it because we're different personalities. But my real big thing fresh out of the gate was I wanted legitimacy. I didn't want anybody to question how legit I was as a concierge. And I say that because, now keep in mind, I'm working in Hollywood. I get it. You've got, cute blonde girl that's a host, a dime a dozen, and I didn't want to be swept up in just another talking head. I wanted people to be like, oh, she's the real deal. She knows what she's talking about. And so with that, shortly after I started Ask a Concierge, then that's when I applied and ended up joining Les Clés, which you had mentioned. And when I then found out that they have this competition every year it's basically the equivalent of Best Young Concierge. So a little bit of backstory on that for those that don't know. Les Clés is the professional organization of hotel concierge. It is very challenging to become a part of it. You have to have two people sponsor you. There's a series of tests. They test call you. You get emails. It is not just like, oh, you've worked in a hotel this amount of time, pay and join. They test people, and it's across the board. Now, it's also an aging profession, and it's a lot of older men in it. And so as an effort to encourage younger generation of concierge, they decided to do a competition to inspire and motivate and encourage younger generation of concierge. So that's where this sort of competition came from. And because they have international conferences every year, in fact, this year, next month, it'll be in Sydney. In order to do that, they basically had each region put forward, like each chapter, in essence, put forward a member that would represent them for that year. So it's almost like the Concierge Olympics. So naturally, I represented Team USA, but you've got Germany, they would pull somebody, Austria, France, Japan, etc. And so some years there might be 13 concierge competing. Some years there might be 21. It all depends on who they have and who's kind of like a bright, shining star in their region. So that's that backstory. So of course I found out about this and I'm like, yo, I need to be a part of that. I'm building my brand Ask a Concierge. It's becoming prolific on social media before other people were even doing it. And so that kind of dovetailed nicely. There's so many more details with that. It also happened around the time that the Grand Budapest Hotel was coming out as a movie nominated for Oscar. By chance, they were going to be hosting a screening in my hotel because we had a screening room. I reached out to them. I put together a social media campaign. All of this, by the way, in the middle of me applying and doing the test for the big international Best Young Concierge Award. So next thing you know, I've got Fox Searchlight behind me. I'm getting concierge from around the world to send pictures of them at their desk, either like carrying flowers, everything that's kind of inspired by the movie. And I would post and reshare, tag this, Fox would share, etc. By the way, they won a couple of Oscars that year. Their producers were staying at my hotel. And then when I introduced myself, they were like, oh my God, you were the girl that helped put that together. That was brilliant. So imagine that's going on in the background while I was putting together and doing the test and everything. And then the conference that year was in Mendoza, Argentina. And that's when I ended up winning the award. And it was the first time, by the way, that anybody from the US had ever won. So that was pretty cool. So go Team USA.
Oh yeah. I love that story because I think what you talked about with legitimacy is something that everybody thinks about no matter what, right? Yeah. How long is long enough to work in this profession to call myself an expert, or when do I jump, or do I keep waiting because then other people are going to do it, like you said about, are other people going to build concierge brands that have more quote legitimacy than me? And I was going to ask you, well, at what point did you feel you were legitimate enough? And I like that you were like, I'm not going to sit back and just wait for a calendar to say, I've been in this profession for 10 years, so therefore I deem you legitimate. You're like, I'm going to find an organization, an internationally renowned organization, which if anyone recognizes the two keys, the golden keys on a lapel, that is Les Clés. And I'm going to go get myself that award. I'm going to go get myself the legitimacy. Yes. And then, like you were saying about positioning yourself, your personal brand, seeing what was happening with Grand Budapest Hotel, happening at your hotel, having that creativity, positioning that, and then yourself within it, it's this beautiful confluence of moment of like, here is legitimacy on a golden platter.
Exactly. And again, there is no there, and I know I've said this already so many times. I feel like a broken record, but there isn't like an ego around it. It really is just a leveraging tactic. And because I knew what I was building was so much bigger. And I also say this to people, especially when they're building a brand at the beginning. Sometimes they get very self-conscious, and I'm like, your brand is bigger than yourself. So, that's why like I always led with the brand Ask a Concierge. Ask a Concierge gets me into the door, then I have to be the personality behind it. Now, at some point, as one builds a brand, and I've thought about this myself, at some point, this is such a weird, we're getting into nuances here, but at some point, when does Sarah Dandashy become bigger than Ask a Concierge? And to some people, it already has. It depends. So it just all depends on how you look at it. But I think certainly at the beginning, having that clever branding to just help get you in the room takes the pressure off of you and your name. Because at the beginning, nobody cared about Sarah Dandashy. It's like, oh, hey, Sarah. It's like, who is Sarah Dandashy? We don't care, but it's like, Ask a Concierge. Oh, well, that's intriguing. I'm interested. And they see a little bit more. So there were so many interesting, and I know your PR hat's probably like loving all of this, but it's also understanding how, again, you play that and understand where you can be and how you can see and just play that game. Because it's a visibility game.
Yeah. Brian Kelly has been a guest on this podcast, otherwise known as the Points Guy. And he talked a lot about this too, of in the beginning, his handle was the Points Guy. It still is, right? But then the Points Guy also became a brand. And he had people say to him, the worst thing that you can do is name your brand the Points Guy, because then it's intrinsically tied to you. And he said on this show, I disagree. I think it was the most valuable thing that I did. But it's interesting because he even talked about that tension that still exists to this day. Now he has sold the company, though he remains completely involved in it as well. But he needs to think about what he's doing as Brian Kelly can either hurt or help the Points Guy, and vice versa, the Points Guy to him as Brian Kelly, right? And so do you think about that still, of like Sarah and Ask a Concierge, or are you so intertwined that you're both making the right decisions because you are one and the same?
I am intertwined. And it's funny that you say that, because I just posted a video, and then like even for context for audiences, so, I've got a very awesome and engaged community on Instagram, and that's B2C. I'm talking to travelers. Those travelers don't want to hear about RevPAR. They don't want to hear about any of that stuff. They want to hear like, how's this going to impact my travel next week? I want to know, like, are prices going up? Are they going down? Should I do this? That's what they want to hear. Where should I go? Versus the content that I put on LinkedIn, I'm very much aware that my audience there are in the business. So they might be hoteliers, they might own short-term rentals, they might be owners, whatever it is. So that content is very specific to that crowd. Now, there's sometimes overlap, but yeah, and it also very much makes sense to my background working in hotels. I would give advice to travelers, yet I always obviously understood how a hotel ran. And just 2 days ago, I think, I posted a reel on Instagram because I had it. And it's me walking with a suitcase in slow motion. And I was just like in a sassy mood, because sometimes we really don't have to take ourselves too seriously. And I'm walking with the suitcase in Beverly Hills. And what was it? I think I have it's like, when the upgrade clears. And then it's like, boarding now, boss mode. Because it's like, there's a boss mode thing. I even put a 50 Cent song on it. Because again, people look at me and they're like, this girl doesn't listen to 50 Cent. I'm like, little do you know, we got street cred over here. That's the whole thing. And so I love this playing. There's a tug of war playing with what people maybe expect from you, and like maybe who you are, or I don't know. We are multifaceted humans, and we all have so many different sides of us, but people get used to seeing and they expect a certain thing from you. So when you're able to kind of push the boundaries a little bit. And so I almost put boarding now, boss bees, kind of spelled out with an asterisk, and which is funny because like boarding now, and it was like, or boarding group. It was like boarding group, boss bees. And I was talking to actually good friends with Anthony Melchiori, and he was like, girl, that is not your brand. He's like, I could never hear you say that about yourself. And I'm like, very true. So I had to just do a clever play of words. I was like, boarding now, boss mode, that's fun. So I was still able to kind of keep that like fun, playful energy, but just keep it a little bit more aligned with me. So yeah, even to this day, I'm constantly playing around with that, being mindful. So I get it.
I like being underestimated sometimes, though. I just had a situation where my husband and I are trying to buy a motel or a resort, and we've been calling around. Well, I've been calling around to existing motel and resort operators and owners just to see if anyone's interested in selling. And we've now seen 3 properties, and 2 of them have been because I've reached out. They're not on the market, they're not for sale or anything. But the personalities that I have encountered, whew, that has been a lot of fun. And it has been so psychologically interesting because these people do not know me at all. I don't think they've taken any time to Google and see if they could do any research on me. Not to say that they would find very much, but they would know I have a background in the hospitality world and maybe know a little bit more about what I'm talking about than they expect, but they don't. And they just speak down to me. And I had one guy say to me, I've been a corporate sales leader for my entire career. So I'm just going to ask you directly, are you even qualified to make a purchase this big? And in one regard, the question is fine, right? Like you want to make sure you're taking time with a qualified buyer. Like that's completely legitimate. But the interesting thing to me is like, you know nothing about me aside from my voice. And what you have determined from my voice is you doubt that I am qualified to make this purchase. Whereas if you think for a second, this girl reached out to me, she's kept in touch for over a year. And now that I'm finally interested in selling, she's the first conversation I'm having. I'm pretty sure she's qualified or she wouldn't be wasting her own time either. So I like what you're talking about here of like knowing yourself as that brand and being able to play into the fact that you are a dynamic human who is a lot of the things that people assume about you and is also not a lot of the things that people assume about you.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I love that you bring up that story because yeah, that does happen. And I think that we're also in this interesting I feel like we've talked about this offline before, but we're in this interesting phase where maybe it's because we don't look our ages, not that we're going to be revealing any of that. But we're
I got a birthday at the end of this week, so the wrinkles are chasing.
Oh my gosh, no. But we're at this point where I think a lot of people underestimate the number of years that we have under our belt, and they underestimate maybe our experience. Also, if you come across as youthful and bubbly, they're like, oh, what? And it's interesting because there have been times, and I'm not this person, but at times I'm like, did you really not Google me? Like when I'm introduced to somebody or I connect with somebody, I send them my full name. That's all I say. I just send them my full name, like if it's like a text or whatever. And I do that because I'm like, you have all the tools that you need in front of you to figure out who you are talking to.
Right.
Google Sarah Dandashy and enjoy the 10 pages of Google.
Enjoy the Kelly Clarkson clip.
Enjoy all of it. But again, it is interesting is that especially if somebody gives you their full name and like in your situation, why didn't he do his due diligence and try and Google and see who you are?
Right.
Like you could be some prominent, I don't know, whatever. Like whatever he deemed to be qualified.
Right. Exactly.
So but people don't always realize the tools that they have at their fingertips. It's like why people ask me stuff where I'm like, I'm just going to Google this. And you thought to ask me where you could Google the same. Now, my clients, that's different. They pay me to Google on their behalf. That's a different thing. But other people, I'm like, bro, I'm just going through my DMs on Instagram. Like, I don't want to now do a deep dive. But because I'm curious, I then do a deep dive so I can help give them an answer. So I'm now more educated, but like, oh my gosh.
And talk a bit about your clients, like that side of your business, what you are doing for them.
Yeah, thank you. Because that is actually a side that I don't talk about a lot. So a lot of people just see what's happening on social media. They know I host podcasts. I mean, I always joke around. I'm like, dude, podcasts are like 2% of what I do. So great. I'm glad that you see them, but your girl's busy. So what I also have that going on in the background is I do private concierge work for ultra high net worth individuals. So that is everything from helping them plan their travel to lifestyles to They're just making their lives smoother. Basically, anything that you would need a concierge for, be it booking restaurants, sending flowers, ordering gifts, booking travel, you name it, I do it. So, and so I've become very deeply intertwined with some wonderful families. And luckily, they also know what I do. And they're pretty good at planning ahead. Every so often, we've got some last minute stuff where it's like, oh, chaos, I'm boarding a flight, but like I need to find out XYZ for you. And I do have a team that I work with, but a lot of these individuals like it because they want to work with me. And so, like today, I think a lot of it also comes with it's that discernment. They trust my opinion. And so like if I'm going to be doing research, they trust that I will kind of sift the appropriate details for them. And then also that I have enough discernment again to make the right decision. So for example, this morning I had somebody was asking about, booking a private plane, and I knew with the time difference in India versus here and what else I was doing, like I wasn't going to get a firm answer. So I just went ahead and was like, yes, please, we're going to book the flight. The cost is fine, etc. And then I told them, hey, I found this. This is what it is. It's in line with what you were looking for. I just told them to go ahead and proceed because it's now late where they are. And they were like, great, perfect, thank you. So it's that fine balance of being able to make some of those executive decisions on somebody else's behalf. And they are so comfortable knowing, okay, you've got our back and you can make high level, expensive decisions and we trust you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you have all of that work happening almost behind the scenes, if you will. And then you have a lot of the front of house style work within Ask a Concierge, which like we've talked about, TV appearances being one of them. So if you think back to your very first TV appearance, I know you said you had a background in acting and film. So did you feel nervous or were you like, this is just another day on the job for me?
Ooh, you want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I actually think the Kelly Clarkson show was my first TV appearance, as in like a talk show or like,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Like I think I did that actually before I was even doing news segments. I've done TV shows, like I've been an actor on shows, I've been on TV, but being part of part of a segment on a live show or taped to live show or live to tape. So that was kind of like fresh out the gate. And I remember that was a challenge for me because in a good way. And in that I knew I had, oh, wow. Did I have like maybe 3.5 minutes or maybe a 5 minutes? I had a 3.5 minute segment. I had 2 clients in essence. I was on there on behalf of Marriott. It was a holiday series and we were giving away gift cards and everything. And so I had bullet points that Marriott needed me to talk about. I had talking points that they needed me to hit in that 3.5 minutes. On the flip side, I was also doing this for the Kelly Clarkson show and I only had 3.5 minutes. And when they say 3.5 minutes, they mean 3.5 minutes. They don't mean 3.5 minutes. Oh, we talked a little bit more. We went to 4. 3.5 minutes. And so there was very early on, I had to realize I have 2 clients in this and I have to make sure I am on time and timely with my delivery. And then I also need to make sure, for Marriott that I hit all the talking points and and knock those out. So it was definitely far more scripted than maybe what I might do today. It was a very specific thing and a live audience and everything. And then, oh my gosh, that Mrs. Claus outfit that I was like, really? This is how we're doing this? And
you looked great in it though. And it's such a great clip. And I would almost argue you had 3 clients because were you also thinking about how can you get your own personal brand messaging in as well?
I wasn't thinking about myself other than I'm the byproduct of it. So I just have to like deliver. But you're right. You're definitely right with that. So my whole thing was like, hey, they've enlisted a lot of trust in me and I need to be professional on it. I need to knock this out of the park. And it was, curious too, because that, again, when you're performing in front of a live audience, that's also different than regular TV, which I do online and in person. And, you don't have an audience. So it's like, and multi-camera. So very much talking with Kelly, but then also acknowledging that there's a crowd there. So being comfortable talking to the crowd and just knowing the cameras are going to get the angles. I don't need to play it to a camera. The camera will get the angles. So knowing very much who I was talking to and just sticking with that as opposed to then, let me go find my camera for my, down the barrel shot. It wasn't the point of that particular show. So yeah. And then in the pandemic is how I then ended up starting to do a lot more TV because, uh, and this is also, I think a lot of lessons in the story is, it's the pandemic. Everybody's freaking out. I'm in, certainly in a travel influencer space. Everybody's like, oh my God, boohoo, I can't wait to travel again. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. Yes, we all feel that same way, but that's very one note. And that's going to be, we don't know how long this is going to last, but we can't keep playing that note for the next 6 months. Like what? So I paused and I kind of was like surveying what everybody was sharing. And I realized I'm like, well, nobody's sharing like what to do next or like what's happening. So that's when I started doing these 2-minute recaps of like these industry recaps of 2 minutes of travel. This is what's going on in the news and how it impacts you as a traveler. Marriott, oddly enough, had come back to me and they're like, we like what you're doing. Do you think you can do TV? And I'm like, I did the Kelly Clarkson show. I guess I just have to do it from my home. So that's when I started doing a lot of TV segments from home. And I have not only just worked for Marriott, I've worked for a lot of big brands from Celebrity Cruises, Margaritaville, Hilton, etc., where I now get hired to basically do SMTs, which are satellite media tours. For those that aren't in the industry and know. So where I'll do like a series of anywhere from 10 to 25 TV interviews in the morning, very much talking about like the specific things that they're pushing out, whether it's a new platform, new this, whatever. And then why they work with me is because I'm now enough, going back to what we talked earlier, as far as legitimacy, I'm now enough of my independent travel expert. It behooves them to work with me because they're not just hiring the CMO of their company, which people are like, well, of course the CMO is going to say it's great. They can hire me as a third-party expert, and my expertise validating whatever they're pushing gives it some more weight. And so, yeah, so again, that's totally the world that you get. But for those that might be tuning in that maybe don't understand the PR aspect of it, that's why they're doing those plays.
So much more interesting to the news stations than having a paid corporate talking head, like you said, to get that third-party legitimacy. And you mentioned with the Kelly Clarkson show being in front of a live audience. Another moment where you were in front of a pretty sizable audience was when you gave your TEDx talk. So can you talk a little bit about how that came to be, how you prepared for that, what that felt like?
Oh my gosh. I have to say, I think, so the two hardest things I've ever done were write my first book. And by the way, I'm in the middle of writing a second book and then doing the TED Talk. And I'm going to do a second TED Talk around the time that the second book comes out. So by the way, I'm sharing this, so you guys all better hold me accountable. But the TED Talk. So in full transparency, I ended up working with a coach because quite frankly, as for any of us that might be fans of TED Talks, it's formulaic. And so why sit there? Times at a minimum. Why sit there and try and figure out and recreate the wheel where I can have somebody kind of help me and guide me? Obviously, it's still going to be my take on it. So I worked with a coach and we'd come up with ideas, and I had all these complex ideas because I'm super cerebral. And anybody that knows me, I'm digging in deep. And they're like, cool, let's dial it back a bit and keep it pretty simple. And the topic was the secret to making someone feel special. And I remember thinking, that is so simple. And they're like, trust us. And so next thing you know, I end up, for those that don't know, TEDx's are free, but you have to submit to them. Big TED Talks, the big ones, that's where they invite you to speak because you are a celebrity, a well-known brand, etc. So TEDx's, any of us, if we have a strong message and a conviction to share it, can apply. And depending on, and they're different regions and they're nonprofits. So sometimes they have different themes. So that's how you might find out where you might get selected. So I was chosen by this producer. She reached out. Now, normally, yeah, because nothing in my life is normal. Normally, you are selected 4 months prior and you've got 4 months of kind of working with them. They like you to see your script. You have to be completely off script. It has to be scripted. There's no winging it. It has to be timed between 10 minutes and 12 minutes. It's very specific. And so again, normally it's supposed to be booked 4 months in advance. I was booked 5 weeks in advance, 5 weeks. So just a little more than a month. And 3 of those weeks, I was on a giant campaign in Southeast Asia, and I was in 6 countries in Asia. The 1 week I was home, I had 6 shoots in Los Angeles. I had a speaking gig. I was going to Turks and Caicos. Like I literally was going, I think I think I ended up going to 8 different countries in that time frame, to give you an idea. And so I luckily I had support of this coach. I did work with a script writer, and I share that because as somebody that likes to do everything on their own, do remember that, if you look at movies, the actors didn't just come up with the script on their own. Look at news anchors. They're not necessarily writing all of that. There is a reason why there are teams in place. And so maybe that was my little ego moment that I had to put that to the side. Yeah, I don't have to write this. And I worked with a script writer, and I'm so grateful I did, because he was able to help me really deduce some of the key concepts so that they were very concise and crystal clear, because he is a professional writer. And so I just had to then knock it out of the park. But meanwhile, I'm everywhere and around the country, circumventing the globe, come back. I have 7 days to memorize this entire thing and go and knock it out in Davenport, Iowa. Talk about stressed out. I was so grateful. The week prior was not very busy for me with other work. And I literally worked on it morning, noon, and night. And also very lucky that ended up, and I'm a firm believer, because I did have help. I did get selected as an editor's pick, which was huge. I still obviously had to go up there and, do my thing and perform it. But I had the proper support in place that I was able to get me to a little bit further than I think if I would have done it on my own. And so that's also a big reminder of like the importance of teams, and you do need to have that support and investing in yourself. So grateful that I did that, and can't wait to do the next one and be nervous and hopefully less chaotic.
If you think about that and all the TV appearances and just everything that you have done, period.
Sure.
What would you say was the most nervous you felt? Was it for that talk, or was it a different moment? It was that talk.
Yeah, it was that talk. Kelly Clarkson was pretty huge too. Well, I would say there've been a couple. It's the first times I've ever done things. Like I remember the first time I was hired to speak, and I was speaking to a bunch of general managers in the Los Angeles area, and I was still a concierge. So it was very challenging because, well, first of all, it was my first time like speaking to a group, and I was being paid for it. But then it's in theory, the hierarchy, like in hotels, I was a lower on the totem pole than all of these general managers. Now I'm being hired to come in and share info and advice with them. And with that, I really let the studies and the facts and the numbers drive the authority of it. And I was the vehicle. But I remember being very nervous for that, but I practiced and rehearsed. I remember being very nervous for Kelly Clarkson. I practiced and rehearsed. And I also remember obviously being very, very nervous for this. And funny, a shout out to one of my best friends, I will say, a former concierge, Kalindra Ashley, who is always back there in the background helping me with things. Actually, for each one of those things, I remember standing in her living room and performing out loud. And I remember being nervous there at her house, just performing out loud in her living room. But because I had that experience, it just took away a little bit of those nerves for when I actually ended up doing it and performing it. So have some good friends that help you out with that so you can perform in somebody else's living room.
And almost like do the thing the first time. Just know you're going to be nervous and that it's going to get better. Even this podcast, the very first episode that I ever recorded was with Will Slickers as my guest. And so in a way, you would think, well, that's a warm room, right? It was a podcast that we co-created together. So of course, he's going to want to see it succeed. He's a wonderful human being. But at the same time, in my head, he was also kind of like my podcast boss. So I felt super nervous about that. And now I'm able to sit here and have so much fun having a conversation with you because you get the first one out of the way and then you can get to enjoy it that much more.
Totally. And there's something to be said for rehearsing in front of and this goes for, even the other day, my mom was applying for a job and we were talking about some things and she was like reciting stuff. I'm like, why are you scripted? You're going in for a job interview. And it had been a while since she'd gone in for one. And I realized, and obviously being my mother, had to be very delicate about it. I'm like, let me come over and like, let's work on some things.
Yeah.
So I let her kind of go with her script for a couple times. I'm like, cool. Now we're going to just throw that away. I'm just going to ask you questions, just talk off the cuff. So then she was so much looser by the end. And she had also done it in front of somebody, because it's very different if you're practicing and there's no audience and you're just by yourself in your own space. If you actually have to perform it for somebody, be it a friend, a loved one, whatever, that's a huge sort of hurdle to get over. And it was super cute because the next day she was like, I did this. I actually turned the question around and I was like, I'm going to take this question in a different direction. And I was like, okay, mom. Okay.
Media training 101.
Exactly. But again, I mean, but she was applying for a job. And so that's even that reminder of all of these tools, I share that because maybe everybody's like, I don't expect to be on Kelly Clarkson. I don't want to be on Kelly. I don't want to public speak. But I share this because you don't have to be in those rooms to necessarily have these tools applied, because this could also just apply to a job interview, which is very much something that we will always be doing on a regular basis.
Or difficult conversations with friends or family, like having that like practice to then be able to say, am I communicating what I actually want to communicate here, rather than getting swept up in the moment. But anyway, Sarah, I want to ask you the last 3 questions that I ask every guest. The first is, what was the best hospitality experience that you have ever had?
Ooh, so that's tricky because I live in a constant state of no expectations, because I feel like if you have high expectations, you'll just constantly be disappointed. But that being said, one of my favorite stories, and it's cute because I might end up staying there in a couple weeks. And it's simple. It is so simple, but it like was so touching. I stayed at the Ritz-Carlton Berlin, and I was there with a friend. It was before a conference we were going to, and we were in they have like a little concierge lounge, the club lounge area, and they had their own honeycomb. Now I've been to many places that I've seen a lot of honeycomb in different hotels, but it's also not everywhere. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. You have your own honeycomb. They're like, yes, we actually have our own bees up on our roof, and this is where we get our little like herbs, and then we have like a little honey, all of this stuff. And I'm just like, I'm wowed. I am floored. I'm like, this is so cool. It's so delicious. I know it's really cheesy. Well, a couple of days go by, and on the last day before I check out, they delivered their own jar of honey from their bees and from the hotel, and it had like all of their branding on it. And I just remember being like, oh my God, now I have a little bit of the Ritz-Carlton Berlin to take home with me. And it's so simple, but it was so not expected. I mean, clearly I was very taken aback by the honeycomb. But it was so simple and to me so touching. And I think that, again, that also ties into what I talked about with my TED Talk, but we've talked about before, is that sometimes these wow moments don't have to be huge. That wasn't huge, but it was, I'm still talking about it, I don't know, 9 years later, 10 years later. My goodness,
Exactly.
So it's amazing.
On the opposite side of that, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
Oh, I don't like talking bad.
You don't have to name names.
No. I definitely won't name names. I mean, I'll say this, and this is what I've noticed, because it happens not necessarily in one place, but I've noticed this, and it's a pet peeve of mine. Just being told no with no alternatives, like no full stop. I go crazy. I'm like, by the way, it's not that I don't want to be told no. I get told no all the time. I have no problem with rejection. That's fine. But it was being in a service experience. And mind you, I also knew that it would be very possible because I also understand and know how hotels work. But I'm like, okay, you just gave me a no for something that you could technically do. But the part that really irritated me is like, it didn't give me options. It's like, oh, we can't do this because of da. But we could do this for you. All I want is an option. Ideally, I mean, in a perfect world, you should give 2 options. But if you could only give it 1, sure, that works too. And so that to me, and it happens everywhere. So that's definitely, I would say, up there as far as a hospitality experience that just gets under my skin. Ooh.
Final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, a person, or a brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Ooh. So hospitality to me means it's a combination of things. It's warm, it's welcoming, it's thoughtfulness. That's a big thing is I think hospitality is really about thoughtfulness. It's about, because under the umbrella of thoughtfulness, you have anticipating needs or doing things or kind of wow moments or going above and beyond. And so it's that thoughtfulness and that it's somebody or a company really care. They actually care if I have a good time or a good experience. And so that thoughtfulness, I think really is probably my favorite way to kind of describe what hospitality is in a bigger sense. Because what is it? It's a warm, welcoming space. It's feeling of community, feeling of home, away from home. It's all of those things. But I think what kind of ties that in is that key thread of thoughtfulness, because that influences all the decisions that are made in a property. Now, as far as a brand that does it best, hard to say. I mean, hard to say, because I think what's also really great about hospitality is that it doesn't look one way. So I could say Peninsula brand does it great, and they do in the Peninsula way. Amman does it great in the Amman way. Ritz-Carlton, so all of these companies are absolutely excelling at it, but it's going to look and feel a little bit different, which is, I think, the fun thing about hospitality is that you can still have that same feeling of like warmth and thoughtfulness, but it just might look and feel a little bit different. And that's where the colors and that we get to play with it.
Sarah, I always have so much fun getting to hang out with you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great. I love it.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. When you look at Sarah's career from the outside, it looks like she always knew exactly where she was headed. From studying culture and foreign service, to her work in acting, radio, and TV, to taking a writing course, and of course, becoming a concierge. Put all those puzzle pieces together, and in hindsight, it looks obvious she would have ended up exactly where she is. But as Sarah pointed out, it's the things that we're best at that we most often overlook. The skills that come naturally, that we excel at without even trying, rarely feel extraordinary from the inside. Her competitive advantage, which seems so obvious to us now, was not strategic. It was instinctive. A great reminder for us all to stop and notice what comes most easily to us, what we truly enjoy, what we gravitate towards, and allow ourselves to follow that. When she was hired as a concierge, she had no prior experience in the profession and only weeks of familiarity with LA. But what her hiring manager said to her has stuck with her to this day. It's more important to have the right attitude than to know all the answers. You can teach knowledge. You can't teach ownership, curiosity, or staying cool under pressure in the same way. That sentiment ties beautifully to what she said about the Peninsula Beverly Hills, a hotel she confidently titled the best in Los Angeles. Sarah said that the reason they are so good at what they do is simple. It's because they don't have a lot of red tape. She was quick to clarify that doesn't mean they don't have rules. Standards of the highest degree, of course they do, to be able to consistently perform at that level. But what it really means is that leadership is communicating their expectations clearly and then says to the team, we trust you. We trust you to interpret the standard. We trust you to adapt to nuance. We trust you to solve for the guest in ways that a rule book could never fully script. Standards create consistency. Trust creates excellence. Much like the Peninsula Beverly Hills, Sarah is always hyper aware of her audience. She talked about intentionally tailoring her message accordingly. On social media, that means talking to consumers who want to understand what's happening now and how it affects their travels. On LinkedIn, her audience is more B2B, so she shifts into a more industry-facing lens. Same expertise, different framing. Finally, I appreciated Sarah's story about questioning her own legitimacy as a concierge. How relatable. I'm willing to bet that all of us at one time or another have felt that dreaded imposter syndrome creep in. When this topic is discussed, the advice is typically mental. Shift your mindset, reframe the doubt. And while that's all well and good, Sarah offered a much more actionable route. She asked herself, who represents the gold standard in the field? For concierges, that's easy, Le Clé d'Or. So not only did she get certified, but she unapologetically pursued a coveted award. Not because she needed to validate her talent, but because she understood the power of positioning, the signal it sends, and the doors it can open. She didn't wait for time to crown her legitimate. She took something that felt intangible, turned it into a benchmark, and just went for it. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.